Thank you for joining us at our community events workshop. If you have a question, please ask in the Q&A. So on your screen at the top, there should be a button that says Q&A. Go ahead and click that, and then you can see the questions, and you can type in your question there. We're primarily going to be saving the Q&A or answering those questions for the end, although we do have some people who are watching, and if there's something that probably should be addressed right away, we'll do it during the presentation, but otherwise we will be saving it for the end. Okay, so let's start with some definitions. We use the letters TFF a lot, and that stands for Temporary Food Facility. A TFF is your average food booth, but it can also be a food truck or trailer that does not have a Riverside County food truck permit. By code, TFFs can only operate at a community event. And what exactly is a community event? These are things like fairs, night markets, and farmers markets that are approved by the city as a community event. TFFs at community events must get permits through us. Weddings and birthday parties are private events and so do not need permits. Lastly is the event organizer. This is the person that we coordinate with regarding everything about the event. This includes all the paperwork, including the TFF paperwork, the payment, and any questions we have. Okay, so what exactly is changing? Well, first of all, we will now have a new application specifically for annual TFF permits, which we will be talking about. We do also have some updated forms. And as for the new inspection format, instead of handwriting our reports and giving them to the event organizer, all the reports will be done on our tablets and then emailed. If you have an annual TFF permit, it will be emailed to you and to the event organizer. If you do not have an annual TFF permit, it will only be emailed to the event organizer. And why are we making these changes? Well, we found a couple of things. First is that we were seeing the same vendors at different events over and over again. And then second, the vendors who would come to our office to talk about getting a food booth started asking about us having an annual TFF permit more frequently. So to the point that they just assumed that we had one. Also, we do hope that in having the annual TFF permit, less time will be spent by all of us on TFFs that we see routinely. So the annual TFF permit has many benefits for both the TFF operator and the event organizer. For the TFF operator, there will be less paperwork since we'll only need to complete it one time a year, first when you apply and then annually. You will not need to complete the paperwork for each event. Second is there will be less time spent on inspections from us. You'll see us for 2 inspections a year, and the rest of the time you'll see us walk by, take a quick glance, maybe ask a question, and then wave goodbye. And finally, and probably most important as far as a benefit, is saving money. You'll be paying one time a year, regardless of whether you do 1 event or 30 events. For the event organizer, there's less paperwork that has to be collected from the food vendors. And additionally, there will be a lower price that will be collected from the event organizer when the paperwork is submitted. Okay, so here are the requirements that we will have for the annual TFF permit. We have that new application, which we'll be going over. We have the TFF Operators Agreement Form, which exists now. We do have a slightly modified one that will be used shortly. Additionally, if you're going to have that annual TFF permit, you will need to have a commissary or possibly something called a home endorsement, which we'll talk about also. We'll need to collect a copy of your government issued ID. And then there may be water tank testing required if applicable. So if you're going to have something that has a water tank, we may be requiring it to have it tested. And then just also so you know that to operate 2 or more booths at the same event or 2 or more events at the same time, you would need 2 annual permits. You would not be able to operate 1 annual permit at 2 events at the same time. Then once all the items are submitted, they'll be reviewed by an inspector. The review could take up to 20 business days, but that's not the goal. Once approved, you will receive a permit that you'll need to keep at your food booth. Now, here's what our annual TFF permit application looks like. And we are planning on having this starting January 1st, 2026. So this should be up in December so that you can get that ball rolling to be working as an annual permit person on January 1st. The fee for a pre-packaged annual permit is going to be $199. And like I said before, that the frequency for the inspections would be one time a year. For an unpackaged annual permit, it would be $498, and the inspections would be at least 2 times a year. And additionally, these permits are going to be on a calendar year. So if you apply in December and so you're good to go in January, you will be paying, that amount, the $199 or the $498. But if you apply in March, it will actually be less for the first time because we will be prorating that. And then you will have to renew come January. So then from then on, your expiration date will be in January. You can see on the application, you'd be checking off whether you're a new operation or an annual renewal. Then you would check off below that whether you're a pre-packaged food booth, an unpackaged food booth, or we will also be using this for our swap meat vendors as well. So there's a checkbox for that. In a little while, we will be talking a little bit more about what makes something a unpackaged food booth or a pre-packaged food booth. Now below that, you just fill out all your information there. You've got your facility name, your DBA, your operator, if that's, or the owner, the owner operator, your billing address, email. And then you can see on the left side, there's a list of those things that are required to be submitted with the application. And then if you're a swap meat vendor, that would be on the right-hand side there. And so what you do is you fill that out and you bring it in with all of those required items. And then we would go ahead and take it in, do the review. And like I said, we'll get you your permit. It has to be reviewed within 20 business days. We have also touched up our operator's agreement form to hopefully make it a little more easier to complete and easier for us to review. One of the things we wanted to incorporate was a way for you to clearly indicate whether you are a prepackaged or an unpackaged TFF. This form will be used just one time annually for the annual TFFs, but it will be used for each event if you are not permitted annually. Also, you should be able to see that at the top of the second page, it does indicate, I apologize, that it does indicate that you do not need to complete page 2 other than the acknowledgement at the bottom if you are a prepackaged TFF. So looking at that form, you can see at the top on the left-hand side, you fill in all your information. And then whether if you're a food booth, you check off what type you are. And then on the right-hand side, you check off if you're a mobile food facility, what type of mobile food facility you are. And then below that, what equipment you have, what food you have, just like what we have right now. It's just organized a little bit differently, along with a little more places to initial that you understand how things are supposed to be and that you'll be doing those. Now, this is going to be something new. Riverside County allows for a home endorsement for TFF equipment and pre-packaged non-potentially hazardous food or low-risk food. This means that any food that needs refrigeration for safety cannot be included, and so would need to be stored at a permitted kitchen approved by this department or purchased the day of the event, which you would need to be able to show receipts for. Also, once a prepackaged food is opened, it cannot be stored at home for your TFF either. So such as a bag of hamburger buns, once that package is opened at the event, it cannot return to the home storage. If you are allowed to have a home endorsement, you will need to wash, rinse, and sanitize your equipment at your TFF once it is set up with the screening, the hand sink, and the 3-compartment cleaning system. If the inspector sees that you have a home endorsement, but you do not have dish soap or sanitizer or 3-compartment setup, and you have prepared food, the inspector will not allow you to sell that food, so it will need to be discarded or you need to leave the event. You will not be allowed to operate until you have those items. If you need to store open food, prepare food ahead of time, or have to store potentially hazardous food, that's those higher risk foods, you cannot use a home endorsement. As I stated before, you'll need to have your own permitted food facility or have a shared facility form, which we'll go over as well. So looking at this form, this is what you would submit with your application to say, I'm going to store just my equipment at my home and my prepackaged food. Everything else will be handled like on the way to the event. There'll be no open food stored at my home. This is that form that you will be using. And just as you can see, there is an annual fee of $199 for that because it is something that we have to spend time reviewing and making sure that everything is okay. Now here's our updated shared facility form. This form can be used for shared kitchens in Riverside County or outside of Riverside County. It does have to be signed by an environmental health specialist from the county where the kitchen is located at the bottom. We can then use this to verify that the information is correct. This does take time. This is not something that we can just accept when we're at the event. It does have to be something that we receive as part of your packet so that we can call and verify that the information is correct. Now, some changes regarding the event organizer. We can talk about, these are things that have actually already taken place, but we wanted to discuss them here as well. So you can see that some of the changes include that an event, well, this was not a change, but an event organizer is required for any event with 2 or more food or beverage vendors. And now there is a single fee that is always charged. It doesn't matter how many food booths are there. There is just a straight up event organizer fee. And then there is a late fee when the paperwork is submitted less than 2 weeks from the event start date. Now we used to have something that we called here a blanket permit, where you would pay an amount for the food booths based on whether it was 1 to 5 food booths, 6 to 10. Now it's going to be actually based on the exact number of food booths and the type of food booths that they are. The fee for each TFF we will be collecting from the event organizer. There will be no additional TFF fee or paperwork for MFFs or annual TFFs permitted in Riverside County. Now that's because with the permitted MFFs or permitted TFFs, and if you don't know, apologize, MFFs are mobile food facilities like food trucks and carts. If they're already permitted, they've already paid the fees. We've already spent our time reviewing them, so we don't need to collect additional fees for them. We are now also requiring that a map and event layout along with the event organizer application. And we also now require a copy of the government issued ID for the event organizer and all of the food vendors as well. And here is the event organizer application that we have started using. If you use it online, those boxes at the bottom will automatically calculate the amounts for you. So you just plug in the number of each type of booth. And if there's a late fee, the $249, you would need to type that in. But then that does do the calculation for you. Please note, there is a checkbox that you are submitting the city or county approval for the event. That is something that we have started enforcing more now as well. So in the small checkbox below the event information, it says county or city approval documentation submitted. So we need to be sure that this community event is something that the city or the county is aware of and that they've approved as a community event as well. So that's page 1. Here we have page 2. This helps us to know what to expect at the event and to potentially be ready for any issues that could arise. Also, here's the list of items we need to see on the map layout of the event. So you see the food and beverage vendors, restroom and hand washing stations, trash disposal, potable water sources, wastewater disposal, shared 3-compartment sinks if applicable, and event organizer booth if applicable. Please notice, as I mentioned, that we are asking for the locations for the trash disposal. It's really important to ensure your TFFs are bagging and disposing their trash appropriately, and that there are enough trash cans and dumpsters to accommodate all the waste from your booths. We have had some issues at some events where the food booths don't have a place to discard their trash, and so they accumulate outside of their booth, and then that attracts vermin, flies, and whatnot. So we want to make sure that there are plenty of ways for your food vendors to be able to dispose of their trash. And the third page. And this is the list of all the food vendors, which can be copied when there are more than 10 food vendors, because it only has the 10 spots for 10 there. This is where the event organizer will provide us with all of the information about each booth. If there is a Riverside County permit for a food truck or an annual TFF, that PR number, which is the permit number, needs to be included here. If there's no number, we're going to assume there is no pre-existing permit. Something to keep in mind is we'll be verifying that the MFF PR number is current and is the one at the event. If a different MFF is there, we may need to do an additional inspection, and the late fee for the event organizer may have to be charged. So sometimes you may have a mobile food facility that has a permit with us, but then they bring a different truck to the location that may not be permitted with us. And that's the kind of thing that we'll be making sure of. So something as the event organizer that you would want to make sure of as well.
Shelley, we do have a question in the chat.
Okay.
What if the community event is on private property?
So if it's a community event, then that is something that we would need to see that the city or county has approved. So if it's private property, which, sometimes that does happen, as long as the city or county has approved it as a community event, then everything else is the same. Okay, so some changes now for the TFF operator. So first of all, there's no more TFF applications since that information is already on the operator's agreement form. We have known for a little while that we were asking our TFF operators to duplicate a lot of information. So this was an attempt to make it a little easier on you, that you don't have to keep writing the same thing over and over again. The fee for the food booth is based on your type of food. That's not a one size fits all. So if you are a prepackaged, you get one type of fee. If you are an unpackaged food booth, it's another type of fee. Now, keep in mind, we are talking right now about not the annual TFFs, but these are what we would call the single event food booths or single event TFFs. The paperwork is now also will need to include a copy of your government issued ID. Now, something to keep in mind, if you turn in your paperwork late to your event organizer, there's a chance that your event organizer will have to pay a late fee. In order for us to collect everything, we are asking our event organizers to bring us complete packets. We're not taking them in piecemeal where it's a 20 food booth event, but then we get one TFF application and then another one and then another one. It all has to be submitted all at the same time. And if any of that is brought in late, there's a chance that the event organizer will have to pay a late fee for that. All of the shared facility agreement forms must be verified prior to the event. So like I said before about that form, we do have to be able to call and verify the information on there. So if you are using someone else's permitted kitchen, you need to have that shared facility form completed and included with your packet. Okay, so there's some things that you should know before you prepare for your event. These are just items that we've seen issues, and so we thought that we would bring this up now, something for you to keep in mind for your events. So if your if your booth is on grass, you'll need to have a proper ground cover, such as a tarp. The event organizer might provide it, but they might not. but we do expect you as the operator of the TFF to have everything you need at the event. Second, it does get really, really hot out here. So make sure you have coolers and coolers of ice to keep your food cold. We have seen some event organizers supply ice, but that is not normally the case. Next, your hand wash water needs to be between 100 and 108 degrees to make sure that the soap works, breaks down grease, but then also doesn't burn your hands. So keep in mind, how do you plan on maintaining the temperature of the water? 3-compartment sinks are sometimes provided by the event organizer. We've seen issues when the vendor thought that that was happening, but it didn't. Even if the event organizer was supposed to supply it, if they don't, we cannot allow you to operate without a way to wash, rinse, and sanitize your utensils and your equipment. Now make sure you know how far away the dumpsters for the food booths are and how the event organizer will be handling the removal of your trash so you don't have to accumulate it close to your food booth and have odors or attract flies, which is probably the last thing you want for your customers when they're coming up to your food booth. Okay, so the inspection. Let's talk about the difference between prepackaged food and unpackaged food. Some things are fairly obvious, such as those packaged foods on the screen or someone barbecuing hamburgers. However, some things aren't quite as obvious. In general, if food entered your food booth in a packaged form and was given to your customers in that same packaged form without ever being opened by you, that is a prepackaged food booth. If at any point a package is opened by you or the food is exposed to the air by you, then you have an unpackaged food booth. In order for a prepackaged food booth to provide samples and remain a prepackaged food booth, the samples must be packaged at an approved location prior to the event, and then those packaged samples handed to the customers. One of the ways we see this is when those little cups you see there in the middle of are used for sauces or even nuts or cut up pieces of bread. Now, looking at that right picture of the beer tap, the food, or the beer in this case, is exposed to the air by the employee. TFFs with beer taps or liquor bars are unpackaged food booths. Although the enclosure or warewashing setup may not be necessary in some of these scenarios, hand washing and a proper ground cover are still required. One of the main things the inspectors look for is to ensure the food has been made and stored in an approved location. This means that the food comes from an approved source. The inspectors attempt to verify this during the paperwork review, and if there are any questions, they will reach out to you beforehand. Things that show that the food comes from an approved source include the proper labeling of food packages, indicating on your paperwork that the food is made at your restaurant, indicating on your paperwork that the food will be prepared at a shared kitchen, which would need to have the shared facility form that we can review, or showing receipts indicating that the food at the booth was purchased that day. If the inspector can't verify that the food is from an approved source, you may be asked to discard the food or even close your food booth. As discussed before, we will not be able to accept those shared facility forms at the event because we need time to verify the information. So I know this is kind of weird wording, but what this means is that when we have the paperwork that we've reviewed, but then we go out to the event and things don't match. So some examples are the food booth, or we come across a food booth that's not on the list from the event organizer. A booth we come across was a prepackaged food booth, but it has open food. Another one is the food booth does not have receipts when the food was purchased that day. And remember, can't say it enough, cannot accept the shared facility form at the event because we need to verify all that information beforehand. So these are things that you want to avoid so that we don't have to possibly have you leave the event or possibly have to make you go down to a prepackaged booth. These are just things that you want to avoid. Now, some things that we do run into at times is we have the fire department rules. The fire department's requirements for where equipment can be, they win over us. So, but sometimes different cities are stricter about what they require than others. So if we get to an event and we've told you all of this stuff has to be inside, but then the fire department says it has to be outside, we will allow that. We will verify with the fire department while we're there to make sure exactly what it is that they need or what they require. But if the equipment needs to be outside because of fire department rules, then that is how it can be. We will then, though, say that, okay, your food can be prepared out here, but then you absolutely have to bring it into your food booths in order to continue the preparation. So I apologize. So back to some of those issues to avoid. If some of those things end up causing us to spend more time, such as the example of a prepackaged food booth has open food. If we're able to make that happen and the event organizer is okay with it, we may be able to allow things like that. But then the event organizer also has to be aware that a late fee may have to be in place because this would be one of those big changes that we would have been able to review ahead of time. So more issues to avoid, which is the trash. So as I said, we've seen some events in which the TFF booths are discarding their own trash on the ground behind their booth with or without being bagged. You do need to make sure that your trash is bagged and then placed in dumpsters. Remember, this will help you because your customers won't smell the trash or see insects flying around your food booth.
Shelley, along the same lines, we did have a question in the chat. What do we recommend for disposing of oil? So I'm assuming waste cooking oil, since most events do not allow them to dispose of that on site.
That's a great question.
That is a great question. I was kind of
Oh,
doing a side look on the internet, and I know that there are, you know, some 1-800 numbers, or like Cal Recycle has a database of facilities that collect waste cooking oil, but for, you know, that's usually for like large generators. So I can
right.
try to do some more research. Maybe if you can send me your email and I can get back to you on that question. I think that was from Sarah.
Okay. Oh, and again, I'm making a little note so that we can all kind of look into that.
And another question about just setup of the event, are the organizers required to provide the 3-compartment sinks?
No, they are not required to. They, by code, they are allowed to. They can provide them per food booth, and or I think the option is one for every 8 food booths. But they are not required to. And so if we get there and maybe whether they said that they would and didn't, or if there's a misunderstanding, uh, it really then falls onto the TFF booth because we can't allow you to operate an open food booth or an unpackaged food booth if there is no way to wash, rinse, and sanitize. Now, code does allow for if the event itself is 4 hours or less, you can bring extra utensils instead of having that 3-compartment setup. But that is something that would need to be indicated on your paperwork that you submit, that that is how you were doing things. But yeah, there is no requirement for the event organizer to provide that. Okay, so hand washing. So if you're going to be using this type of hand wash station, you need to make sure that the spigot is designed to stay on without you holding it on. The spigot in the top picture works that way. You can flip it up and make sure it stays on. You know, it just stays in that on position. The coolers in this kind of setup are usually the kind with a button that you have to continually push to keep the water flowing, and you can't properly wash your hands that way. So you may have to order the spigot separately and replace it on your cooler that you're using. Additionally, if you're going to be using, I mentioned this earlier, that if you're going to be using a hand wash station that has a tank, then we need to make sure that that tank is clean. And this is something that we are going to be requiring for the annual TFFs. That for that tank, you will need to have it tested for coliform and E. coli within 60 days of your application and then your annual renewal. Okay, if you have unpackaged food, you likely need a full enclosure. This means that it needs to be from the top and down all the way to the ground. We've seen people get screens that only go down to the top of their table, so it does not go all the way down to the ground in that case. It does need to go all the way to the ground. Additionally, all 4 sides need to have a screen. A 3-walled screen doesn't actually stop flies from entering. That being said, you also can't use a clip to hold part of it open. Same idea, flies can still get in. I know that this is one of the harder ones to get up and going in order to be able to be operating, but this, what you see on the screen, is the type of setup that we expect to see fully done by the time you are preparing food. And along those lines, in order to start preparing your food, these things have to be completely set up and in place. You need to have your hand washing set up, your booth fully enclosed, and you need to have your 3-compartment sink with soap and sanitizer available. If the inspector sees you preparing without these, there is a chance that you may need to discard the food you've started preparing. So if we see like this person chopping peppers, but there's no hand wash station, we have no way of ensuring that the person's hands are clean. So we may require that, like I said, that food to be discarded. And please remember, this is for the safety of the food and for your customers. Okay, so before we end the presentation, I would like to direct you to our website for events. We do have a lot of information on our website. And also when the application for the annual TFFs is up, this is how you would get to it. So you would, so you can see where it's circled there. It says programs and services. Oh, I apologize one more time. So before I get to that, you can see on the right-hand side where English is circled. So our website is designed just the way things are, that you could choose to have the wording changed to different languages. So if you wanted to be in Spanish or other languages, you could do that there. Now back to how you would get to the information on our website. So if you hover over program and services, you'd get a drop down that looks like this. And then where that circle says community events, that's where you would click on there. And then that would bring up our community events site that has 3 options there. So then you'd click on the big button that says temporary events. And then here you can see the changes that took effect on July 1st. So that's all the stuff that's at the top of our page right now. And then if you scroll down, there are several documents that you might find useful, such as the temporary food facility operator's guide or the self-inspection checklist. And if you want us to spend very little time in your food booth, check these out and be ready for us. Then we can come in, right? And just, you're all ready to show us everything. We can take all of our temperatures, the questions that we're going to ask, and you're all ready. Another thing to keep in mind is sometimes we do use updated forms. Just as we go through things, we might just, like our operator's agreement form is about to change. We did a major overhaul of that not too long ago. And now we're just doing little tweaks as we find other things that would be helpful. So make sure that you're using the updated form, not just the same one from last year. And Sarah. And that is it. Are there questions in the Q&A?
Yes, I do have some more questions, Shelley. The first one is it's about purchasing food on the same day as the event. If items or supplies are purchased before the day of the event, but aren't opened until the day of the event to make the product, is that not acceptable?
So it does depend on what those products are and how much. That is something that we would want to see on your operator's agreement form. If you're planning on some of it stored elsewhere, there's a chance that we would be able to allow some non-potentially hazardous food stored at home, but that is information that we would need to know ahead of time so we can make sure that everything is done safely.
Next question, what is the prorated rate for the temporary food facility if purchased in March or later?
I'd have to do the math, which we haven't
I did it.
technically done.
I did the math.
So
I'll cover it, Shelley.
so
For
that would be what
for
that'd be
prepackaged
yeah,
temporary food.
3/4 of
Yeah, it would basically be by the quarter. So whatever quarter you were coming in through the year, and each quarter, depending on if it's a prepackaged or an unpackaged temporary food facility. So the annual fee for prepackaged is $199. So if you divide that by the 4 quarters, it's $49.75 a quarter. So depending on how many quarters you're missing, you would just subtract that. And for the unpackaged, the annual fee is $498. So divided by 4 would be $124.50.
so thank you.
Problem. Okay, next. We were told that we can't keep hot food in steam holding stations for up to 4 hours. Also, do we need to have a cover on our flat grill used to cook food at the event?
Okay, so the first one is I didn't understand actually that.
We can't keep hot food in steam holding stations for up to 4 hours.
So what we're looking at is the temperature of the food. When you're talking about hot holding food, we absolutely do allow the steam tables if that's what you're talking about. As long as it's holding at 135 or above, you just might not be able to cook using it if that's maybe where the confusion comes in. Because steam tables are not designed for reheating or cooking food. But once you cook it or reheat it in a quick manner, then it can be stored and held above 135 in the steam table. And the second part was, does your food on the grill need to be covered? No. So if you're talking about, if you're inside a food booth, you are already covered. So I'm trying to see if you mean, so I'm going to kind of guess the scenarios that you're talking about. If the fire department allows the flat grill to be inside the food booth, we will require it to be inside the food booth. So therefore it would need to be covered. If in this case, in some cases, the fire department says it cannot be inside the food booth, then it does not need to be covered. But then once you're done cooking, it needs to be brought into the food booth and kept hot or served.
All right, there's also a request to get the slideshow in PDF form so that they could send it to food vendors in the beginning of the year, along with the application for our events.
I know we're recording this, so the recording is going to be available.
That's correct.
We could
It's
probably
going to be
PDF
on our
it.
website with all of the new forms. So I think the easiest way would be to send everyone directly to that page of our website that Shelley navigated us to. And that's where you'll find the video to watch again, if you like, and as well as any of the forms. All of the newest forms will be available there.
Here.
A question about water containers where are those tested? So getting water tanks testing.
Oh, we need to put that on that site too. We have it on a link to the approved labs on our mobile food facility page, but we'll probably need to put it on our temporary food page as well.
Okay, they have been getting pushback from vendors for submitting a copy of their IDs. Can we just get their ID numbers for the paperwork?
No, we do actually need to take a copy to verify the government issued ID.
Can you verify that if a prepackaged food vendor offers samples, they are not considered prepackaged?
Okay, so depends on how they're doing those samples. If they're pre-packaging their samples at their permitted kitchen, so there was that picture with the little cups that we often see where they're sauces or nuts or little pieces of bread, and they're put into those little cups, but those cups are put together beforehand at a permitted kitchen, and they're just handed that cup. Then that remains a prepackaged food booth. But if the booth employee is opening anything in order to provide a sample, then that pushes it into unpackaged food. So if the opening of a container or if the food being exposed to air is done by the employee, that is an unpackaged food booth.
Okay, similarly, can farmers sample, example, cutting up fruit with proper hand wash setup, utensils, covered containers, and booths that are not screened?
So that is a slightly different scenario. If you're talking about at a certified farmer's market, that is a different section. So when you see a farmer's market, you're actually looking at two events happening at the same time. There's the side that with the farmers, which you notice they are always all together because they're actually under the same single one permit. And then the food booths that aren't part of the certified farmers market are part of a community event that's running adjacent to the farmers market. And unfortunately, they do have two different sets of regulations. On the farmers market side, they're not allowed to do any prepping of food or anything over there. There's the samples are typically packaged, and you might have to help me out on this. I always have to review these things before I go to a farmer's market for an inspection because I do them so rarely, honestly. So if you're talking about the farmer's market specifically, then there are different regulations for sampling than there are for on the community event side. That's about what I've got.
Mm. I've got the bulletin up. I'll look it up while you're doing the
Thank you.
next question. Yeah, no problem. If these rules don't take effect until 2026, what information do we need for an event that's going to be in the rest of the year?
So the things that are for the event organizer that were in the presentation are already in effect. The only things that are going to take place coming January 1st is that we are going to be able to have a annual permit. That's really the biggest change that's happening in January. Right now, almost all of the other things that we talked about are already in play. We're just kind of trying to ease into them a little more. So whether it be the requirement for we've always required the city to have approval of a community event. We're just making sure of it a little better now. So anything that I said, pretty much like the receipts, the inspectors have probably started, if they haven't always been, asking for receipts or of the food that's there if you did not have a shared facility form. So we're just trying to be a little more cognizant of the requirements when we're doing our inspections now. But the only change to January 1st really is the addition of the annual TFF permit.
Okay, this one says, how many events can a prepackaged annual permit go to?
As many as they want, as long as they aren't occurring at the same time. So that was one of those benefits. Yes, if you're a prepackaged food vendor, I think that annual permit was $199. The fee for a single event right now for a prepackaged is $50. So really, once you hit 4, you've broken even, and anything beyond that, you're saving money. But if there were, say, 2, Christmas events going on at the same time, and you wanted to be at both, you would need to have 2 annual permits. You could not use the same permit for both of them. But other than that, you could be at as many as you want.
All right, next one. If we have a mobile food facility already and also do pop-ups, we will be getting an annual TFF as well. Are we able to use our same commissary still, or would we have to go get the home endorsement?
Okay. So if you are a mobile food facility, to become an annual, you need to go through actually the process of getting your mobile food facility permitted as a mobile food facility. That's not something I had in the presentation. We will not be having an annual TFF permit for a mobile food facility. When you say, and also pop-ups, I'm not, that's a term used in different ways by different people. But if you want to use your mobile food facility or MFF at places other than events, then it does actually need to have a mobile food facility permit, an MFF permit, not a TFF permit.
And if you already have that annual permit, you don't need anything additional. Your
Right.
MFF permit covers you.
Yes.
Okay. What is the price per TFF vendor for booths packaged and unpackaged? So I'm assuming that means non-annual.
So the non-annual prepackaged right now, a prepackaged is $50 per event, and an unpackaged is $100 per event. So yes, that's the kind of thing that you want to keep in mind. At what point, how many are you thinking you're going to do for the year? So if you're going to do 5 events, it would make sense to do an annual permit. But something to keep in mind is if you are going to an event and you don't have an annual yet, you can't really apply for an annual at the same time as applying to be at a specific event. Like I said, the possibility of it taking the review taking 20 working days is low. The inspectors try very hard to get to all of their paperwork on things like this in less time than that. But there's always the possibility that the inspector will see something that they need to have questions on or that can't approve. And so there could be some back and forth. So it could take longer than that 20 working days. So if you think that you may be doing numerous events, apply early before your event, your first event gets here, so you can already just have that permit ready to show the event organizer.
And this is another comment that is probably good to confirm or just to verify, Shelley. There's no additional charge for the organizer for the annual permits, and that's for mobile food facilities too. So when they're
Right.
calculating the fees.
Yeah, exactly. So if there were, so let's say there was a 10 food vendor event and 3 of them have annual TFS. We will only be charging for 7 of the booths, whether they be packaged or unpackaged. And same with just like we already do now. If there's an event that has 10 food vendors, but one of them is a Riverside permitted MFF, we don't charge for that one. We charge for the 9.
Okay, what about farmers markets? Some vendors are at different ones on the same day.
So if you were to have an annual, then you would need to have a separate annual permit for each one that's happening at the same time. If you are a single event, then you're paying for each location at the same time. So if I'm Shelley and I've got 3 booths, but I don't have an annual, and I have one booth at 3 different farmers markets at the same time, I'm paying for all 3 of those. If I'm an annual, I need to have 3 annual permits.
This kind of goes along with that. If you have 2 food trucks and do 2 events on the same day, you need 2 annual permits.
Yes. So again, with the trucks, if the trucks are going to be annually permitted, they need to be permitted as a food truck or an MFF. And so that would cover that scenario automatically.
Can a mobile food facility from outside of Riverside County get an annual TFF for operating regularly inside of Riverside County?
No. So if you have a food truck, an MFF that's permitted elsewhere, you would then need to be permitted as an MFF in Riverside County annually. There is not going to be an annual TFF permit for food trucks for MFFs.
What do vendors pay when they do not have an annual permit and are not the organizer?
The prepackaged food booth, and granted, we collect the money from the event organizer. We do not collect it from the TFFs. So we charge $50 for a prepackaged and $100 for an unpackaged. But we would collect that from the event organizer, who we kind of assume would be passed on to the food booths through the event organizer.
Do you need to say what event you are working at to apply for the annual permit?
No, because we know that, that could change. What we expect to see is the event organizer, though, listing you on any event that they have. That way, when we show up, we would know, right? We can talk about this a little bit. So if you are an annual TFF and we see that you're at an event, part of our job is to see if you've had an inspection yet. If you have not had your second inspection yet, then that would be the plan, that you would get your inspection during that event. But we can't expect you to know every event that you're in January, what you're going to be doing in October and November, December. Are there any other questions?
Yes. Can you hold multiple annual permits at the same time?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And like I said, that's so that you could operate. And so not only talking about 2 events at the same time, if you wanted 2 booths at the same event, you would need 2 annuals as well. And I know some people have done that. I didn't bring that up at all, but that would be another scenario where you would need the 2 annuals.
Okay, where can we access the 2026 annual application and how soon can vendors begin applying?
So it will be available in December. I can't give you an exact date, but it will be in December as soon as it goes through all of the routings and approvals. But like I had at the end of the presentation, when you go to our website, rivcoeh.org, that's RIVCOEH.org. And go back one more time here. You hover over that programs and services, click on community events, click on temporary events, and then it would be on this screen. And if you scroll down, it'll probably be in an area that looks like this.
Okay, certified farmers market question. For weekly certified farmers markets, the TFF vendor is applying online, paying themselves for the annual permit, and then giving that info to the organizer to submit quarterly to EH, correct?
Somewhat. So there's no applying online. So yes, you would get your annual TFF, you'd submit your paperwork through us, get approved as an annual TFF. And then that permit information you would be giving to the event organizer of the farmers market that the event organizer will provide to us, that you are a food vendor quarterly there.
Annual permits will only be for mobile food facilities, or TFFs will be event only that the organizer will be collecting?
So again, mobile food MFFs, if they are permitted annually, they are permitted as an MFF. There's no mobile annual TFFs. And if any, whether it be a mobile or an annual TFF permit, those are not charged per event. So the event organizer is not charged for any of the food vendors who have annual permits, whether it be an annual TFF or annual MFF.
Okay. If I'm doing 2 events on one day, would it be cheaper to obtain an annual and a one-day event permit instead of obtaining a second annual permit? If so, how much is a day event permit?
So that's the decision that you would have to make and doing the math. If depends on how often you're doing them. If you're talking about an unpackaged food booth, that's $499, $498, $499. It breaks even. What was that?
$498.
$498. So that you hit break even at the 5th event. So it really just depends on how many times would you be operating at the same time. So if it's only going to happen once, I probably would not spend $500 for another annual instead of just the $100 one time.
Okay, there's another one. Is there someone to speak with on more than one or on a more one-on-one basis to get some more clarification and ask specific questions for a first timer as a vendor?
You can always call your local office. So we've got 6 offices. If I go back here, so I know it's not circled, but you see where it's circled English. To the left of that says contact us. If you click on that, you can see where our 6 offices are. We've got, as far as the food program, we've got Riverside, Corona, Murrieta, Hemet, Palm Springs, and Indio. You can call any of those offices and check when you go to that contact us, make sure you look at the food phone number, and you can talk to us anytime. Well, as long as we're here between 7 and 5:30.
If the annual permit application isn't available until December and the event coordinator has to have the paperwork turned in no later than mid-December, how can we get this done with annual permit numbers since we won't have that information?
We will be doing our best to make all of that happen. And I know that the rollout of this will require some flexibility. I can't give you an absolute answer on that, but we will be doing our best to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible.
Everything's pretty much good to go. We're getting it translated into Spanish, and then we should be able to post that up on the website so it's available in plenty of time. Do organizers need to submit a TFF for annual permit holders?
No, all they need to do is list it on, there's the 3rd page where they list all of their food vendors. They would list the annual TFF vendor there along with the PR number. That way we can verify that it is a permit with us, and that's how we'll be making that determination. But if that's the case, you do not need to turn in the operator's agreement form because you already did as part of your annual permit application.
If I purchase an annual permit, is the organizer still allowed to charge me for participating at the event?
That all happens, I guess, yes.
Yeah.
But that's all a business decision and nothing that we would get involved with.
Who would we talk to about getting approved to use a restaurant as a commissary?
The office that covers that restaurant. So that's where that shared facility agreement form comes in. So you'd complete that and then submit it to the office that covers it, depending on what city that restaurant is in. And then they would take a look at it and hopefully approve that as a commissary for you.
Right. I believe that is all of the questions that we had in the chat, Shelley.
Oh, that works out perfectly. Okay,
Yep.
so like I said, if you guys have any more questions, please feel free to contact us. Go to our website. There's at rivcoeh.org. Click on the contacts and see which office is closest to you. And there'll be someone there who can answer your questions. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. I appreciate you joining us. And so you can have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.